I'm Mark Gagan, and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling enterprise-scale underwriting through a single pane of glass. The transformation of major Japanese insurers into genuinely global insurers has been one of the most remarkable long-term changes of the last couple of decades. Today's guest is an embodiment of that internationalisation. Ken Reilly is CEO of insurance for Sompo International in Asia Pacific, but boasts a 30-year international career that has seen him work in New York, London, Bermuda and Tokyo. Ken now splits his time between Singapore and Tokyo because, in addition to his APAC role, he now runs Sompo's own Japanese commercial insurance division. This is a really interesting encounter because, swayed by the big numbers, we are often guilty of an over-intense focus on the North American and European insurance and reinsurance markets. In this episode, I get to talk to someone who knows that world intimately to show me the nuances of the Asia-Pacific market through the eyes of a global business that has been in some of those markets for 50 years. Ken is a great guest, and this is a very refreshing and enlightening interview. So, listen on for the do's and don'ts of Asia-Pacific expansion, and a lot more besides. Enjoy the podcast. Ken, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Thanks, Mark. Great being here. Thanks for having me.
For anybody out there listening who doesn't know you, could you just briefly introduce yourself and run us through your insurance career to date?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. So I just crossed the 30-year line in the industry, which is a little bit of a shocker to me. I always considered myself one of the youngins, but clearly not anymore. I started my career in New York as part of a reinsurance underwriting outfit. It was an MGA backed by some U.S. capital. I had always pursued an international career, and at a uni in Philadelphia, I was able to join this MGA that had offices in Bermuda, that had offices in London.
Which one was it?
The company I joined was called the Unum, but they had an operation business called Duncanson Holt in the London market.
Oh, well, absolutely. Yeah, I do remember them. I remember they used to write on behalf of Chubb in the London market.
Yeah, and they had various other insurance companies and wrote some accident health business as well. But it was a great opportunity to kind of jump into the industry, and true to their word, they offered me roles starting in New York, but quickly moved me to Bermuda and then from there to London, which gave me that exposure that I was hoping to get.
That's the kind of insurance and reinsurance grand tour, Ken.
Yeah, for sure. So, having had that opportunity to work in those core markets at an early stage in my career really shaped what laid ahead as I moved on. From that organization, I joined a larger global multinational US-based organization, AIG, and moved back to New York, where I joined the financial lines team, learned how to underwrite and develop the financial lines portfolio across financial institutions, across not-for-profits, across public companies, et cetera. And again, my goals remained consistent to really pursue an international career. And again, true to their word, I was given the opportunity to go abroad again and started from London, moved to Hong Kong, and ended up in Tokyo over a span of 30 years, largely on the underwriting side, and the financial line side, growing their portfolios in various countries, introducing the product, introducing cyber, developing the markets, working with our distribution partners, and then transitioned into more of a commercial management role. And my last position with AIG was running their P&C business in Japan for 5-6 years before I made the transition to Sompo, which was 3.5 years ago now, and have never really looked back. It's been a great ride with Sompo, more fast-growing, dynamic organization. And my current role with Sompo is I am the CEO of the insurance business of our APAC business. But starting in April of this year, added responsibilities to take over the ownership of the commercial business of our domestic Sompo Japan business, in addition to my APAC responsibilities. So I shuttle between Singapore and Tokyo and all the countries in between, and continue to drive our profitable growth ambitions across the Sompo enterprises.
Your role, that's a big role. Asia Pacific, a huge area, a huge economic zone, and also so different as well, so non-homogenous, so individual, so many different territories. So can you run us through what that really means from a Sompo perspective, the size and the scales of the operations that you're overseeing, obviously now adding in the Japanese commercial as well?
Yeah, keeping the Japan business aside for a moment, The APAC business spans across 11 markets. Our regional headquarters are based in Singapore. We have 6 or 7 core markets where we have fully owned subsidiaries. We do have some other markets where we are partners with other local carriers in those specific markets. It's a focal point for the Sompo Group. We have a lot of growth ambitions in the region, more investing to the region. We want to ensure that we capture the growth opportunities, especially in emerging markets, but also in the more mature markets like Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, et cetera. We have an enviable position in the sense that we have licenses in these countries. So we're not entering this market trying to figure out what paper to write on or how we deploy our capital. We have established insurance organizations in the majority of those markets. In some of the markets, we've been there for 50 plus years. So Sompo is not a foreign name in many of these markets. It's an established brand. It's got a name for itself that really resembles resilience, stability, and the nature of what Japanese organizations bring to those respective markets. But over the last couple of years, and our truly kind of globalization of the Sompo Group, we really pivoted and accelerated the growth of ensuring that we're not just serving our Japanese clients, but making sure that we're focused on growing the local indigenous business in those respective markets. And much like many of the other North Asia insurers that have presence globally, initially, a lot of those licenses were set up to cater to our Japanese clients that had operations abroad. But we've obviously continued to foster those relationships and grow those relationships, but pivoted to ensure that we're focusing on the commercial growth opportunities, some of the wholesale opportunities that we have out of Singapore, and in certain markets where we have consumer presence to grow our consumer business as well. So overall, across the core markets, our size is approximately $1 billion. We continue to grow quite rapidly in these markets. When you count the non-majority owned businesses that we have in places like India, Vietnam, Philippines, that number is quite significantly larger. And in markets like India, there are over 2,000 people spread across many branches across the country. But our regional headquarters is based in Singapore, where we have our centers of excellence across our underwriting capabilities, our analytics capabilities, and our functional capabilities.
In terms of numbers, what sort of GWP does that all represent? It sounds like lots of lines that add up to a big number at the bottom, one presumes.
Overall, the consolidated entities, we are approximately $1 billion US. When you add up those non-consolidated entities, it is quite significantly larger than that. From an employee perspective, we have over 4,000 employees across the APAC region, and we continue to optimize kind of the portfolio focus. So I touched on consumer presence, the commercial presence across these markets, commercial business, really the center of excellence, a hub and spoke model that's focused in Singapore, with the spokes going into markets like Hong Kong and Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and consumer markets really focusing on a few countries where we can get the scale and the materiality and the presence in those markets, in those specific fields, whether it's auto insurance, whether it's health insurance, whether it's home insurance, with the right distribution partners, with the right ability to penetrate into those customer segments where we think we can provide value and generate the adequate returns.
It's great to hear about that DNA, that Sompo's mission in Asia Pacific was originally to service the Japanese multinationals. That was your seed, and that's where you were able to take root in so many of these different markets. And now you're branching out. So in terms of that balance between commercial and personal lines, what is the split at the moment?
So when you look at it from a Sompo P&C organization, again, we're in a very enviable position in the sense that we have solid diversification across the lines of businesses that we write and the geographic presence that we have across the globe now. So when you look at Sompo P&C, approximately 50% of our business is commercial P&C business, and 35% is consumer business, with the remaining reinsurance business through our Sompo Re platform. So again, it's a portfolio that can weather market cycles and count on one side over the other when markets evolve. And similarly, in the APAC region, we have that split. I'm responsible for the insurance business. We are very, very conscious of our geographic segment and product mix across the APAC region and globally to ensure that we're not overweight in any certain area, that we have the benefits of diversification across our portfolios. But we do take advantage of market cycles as well. If there is clearly a solid opportunity to grow a certain segment in the commercial portfolio in a certain country, we will ensure that we have the right people, the right resources to penetrate into those certain areas where there is dislocation and there is opportunity. And I think that's the key to being an agile organization, and the organization that can move quickly, that we try to keep the bureaucracy out so we can be there when there are needs, and to ensure that we can capture those dislocation moments across any region and offer our products and services to those customers.
And of course, you've got pretty good diversification within your own division, but at the same time, of course, you're already global, so you've got even better diversification at a group level. So perhaps it's one of these things you probably don't have to worry about as much as others might have to.
Yeah, and I think that's really kudos and credit to the Sompo Group, the Sompo P&C leadership, that have really established an organization, really first of its kind, with Japanese roots, that has now become truly global. And you flip back 10 years ago to where Sompo was back then to where Sompo is now, it's night and day. It was largely a domestic organization that had international presence, but wasn't a global organization. They had an international presence to serve their Japanese clients. They had a few ventures, some that were successful, some that had some challenges. But over the last 5 years, 6 years, the acceleration of truly becoming a global company, first with the acquisition of Endurance, and a lot of the organic growth that we have had across APAC, across continental Europe, UK, and North America, has really established ourselves as one of the leading global players with over 30 billion in P&C premiums across the globe.
I can absolutely concur with that, with being a sort of, your typical Anglo-Saxon, London-based insurance journalist. I wouldn't have known who to talk to at Sompo 10 years ago, and it probably would have been difficult to have a conversation. And of course, all that activity brought all the people I've known, many people I've known very well over long periods of time, into that sphere of influence. So I've always had people to talk to. Obviously, Julian James is now retired, but, I had him on the podcast a couple of times. And it suddenly, yes, it becomes obvious that this is becoming a much more international organization, because people in your position have a much more international flavor about them in terms of their international experience, and they're people I'm more likely to have met before and to have something in common with.
Yeah, and it's truly exciting to be part of, because the people across the board, whether in New York or in London or in Singapore, we are attracting some of the best in the industry. People do want to be part of the Sompo story, the Sompo growth story, our global ambitions. We have a great parent in the Sompo Group who continues to support and to empower the global business and truly become a global organization, not just outside Japan, but inclusive of the Japanese business, which I have the fortunate opportunity to be part of as well.
When you're sitting in board meetings and you're being appraised of your performance, Ken, what are they measuring you against? What is your task? What's your job, your objectives that you've been set in APAC?
Obviously, we have our group ROE targets, the core financial targets that we all remain very disciplined and focused on, to ensure that we maintain the underwriting discipline, the underwriting organization that we strive to be. But we also always continuously talk about being resilient, being able to weather any of the storms ahead of us, whether that be climate-related issues, loss-related issues, economic type of issues. So we always are setting our portfolios, our strategies, to ensure that we are a resilient organization, that we are focused not just specifically on growth, but profitable growth, and to ensure that we are serving those customers and segments that we offer services and products to in a way that is meaningful, that we are addressing protection gap, addressing new emerging needs. So it's across the board. It's both qualitative and quantitative when we're looking at our KPIs and our KGIs to measure ourselves and hold us accountable for the markets that we serve in the respective regions and markets that we operate in.
So it sounds like you've got to hit the returns and that resilience. Is there a growth target as well? But at the same time, the growth target is always going to be secondary to maintaining the core discipline.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's underwriting discipline always remains core and center to what we do. Obviously, the Asia Pacific region is a growth region. There is still much to do in regards to addressing the protection gaps across some of the emerging economies, but even some of the more mature markets, there's still plenty of growth opportunities. But when you look at the scale, size, width, and depth of the North American market, the APAC market, when you look at a market by market perspective, it's still small comparatively to our colleagues in the North American market. So we realize that. And in order for us to be effective in the APAC region, we must remain aligned. And one of the lines that we use in the APAC region is to be regionally aligned, but locally empowered. We work across, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, very diverse markets with different needs, different maturity level in the insurance journey, in the insurance curve, various nuances from a cultural perspective, the way products are distributed or transacted. So we want to ensure that we're locally empowering our countries and markets that we operate in, but we need to have an aligned risk appetite framework. We need to know and be able to anticipate certain trends. What we learn through the hard way in one country, that knowledge should be transferred to another country. We need to ensure that we continue to leverage our expertise, our specialism that we have across the globe in every corner of the world that we operate in. And I think that's what really transforms an organization to be a global organization as opposed to a federated, siloed organization, which doesn't truly have the capabilities to leverage the data, the skill sets, the opportunities, and the know-how that you generate by having a 30 billion plus P&C organization. And I think not just to look at it from an APAC lens, but to really look at it to ensure that we're connected with our colleagues in London, with our colleagues sitting in San Francisco, New York, Tokyo, etc.
Yep. And when you go to those markets, you mentioned about specialisms. Obviously, somewhere in the world, Sompo probably writes almost every insurance product that there is. I presume there's probably one product you don't write for some particular reason. But when you go into those markets, the really diverse markets, do you expect to be perceived as a generalist in the sense that, well, I can go to Sompo because Sompo probably do everything? Or do you go with those specialisms that you mentioned? Do you go more strategically to say, in this market, we want to be known as, I don't know, a construction insurer, a really good engineering and construction insurer. And that's how we're going to get our inroads into this market because we know we can really win in that market with that expertise. You've got a very big toolkit. Do you use very specific tools for different markets to crack open different markets? Or do you go more as a generalist to say, we're Sompo, we can do almost everything, come and talk to us?
No, I think, we do have a very big toolkit. And you include our domestic Japanese business that have been in business for 130 plus years. They've seen it, done it, experienced it. So they do have a wealth of knowledge with various products. Obviously, our global business, our wholesale business, our specialty business, our reinsurance business, those are very much more specialist focused segments. When we go into a market, we don't want to be everything for everyone. We need to understand the nuances of the local market. We need to understand where the opportunities are, where we think we can deploy capital and get the adequate set of returns. So our approach, perhaps historically, with more of a generalist approach, has pivoted to a specialist approach over the last 5 to 10 years. And that's starting to pay dividends on ensuring that we are there for the customers for very specific risks that we know we are 100% comfortable and that we know that we can work with the customer to ensure that we are meeting their needs, but also ensuring that we are pricing adequately, that we have the right loss controls, that we have the right capability to mitigate the risks as needed and to be good risk selectors in those certain segments. Yeah. So certainly our focus is not trying to be generalists for everyone. We know what we're good at. We know what we're not good at. We need to try to understand the local nuances and adjust accordingly.
And when you are comfortable, of course, you can bring very meaningful capacity that could be very meaningful in that marketplace to make you a very relevant market as well. I suppose something that be difficult to ignore at that point as well.
Yeah, and we obviously have a very healthy balance sheet. We manage it very, very prudently. we do have to have, as part of our underwriting discipline around our line sizes and exposures. So we continuously look to optimize those portfolios and ensuring that we're not overweight in any sort of segment or geography to be able to manage through the cycles and the loss scenarios.
In the market today, the markets you're operating in, where are you looking to grow? Where are the best opportunities?
Yeah, I think APAC overall as a region has great opportunities in every specific market. Certainly from a commercial perspective, we continue to strengthen our presence in the Singapore market and in the Hong Kong market. Not only the wholesale business, but the local commercial business. Hong Kong is a country that continues to reinvent itself. It has its ups and downs, but we do believe that the opportunities that come into the Hong Kong market will continue to grow, and we are strengthening our capabilities in the Hong Kong market. Singapore, we've brought on over 50 underwriters, specialist underwriters, commercial underwriters over the last year and a half to capture not just the wholesale opportunities that come through the Singapore market, but to truly act as a commercial business. The hub and spoke, which I referred to a little bit earlier, the center of excellence, whether it's marine, whether it's casualty, whether it's financial lines, the excellence having congregated here in Singapore, but then ensuring that we have the local countries and local empowerment where we are training and raising specialists in those local countries to go after the local opportunities in those respective countries.
So you've got your experts, your real experts, the seasoned experts are in Singapore. You've got local underwriters perhaps referring things occasionally to Singapore, but over time referring less and less as they get their own experience and they really, earn their spurs. And then that they can sort of fly off, and obviously you're always keeping tabs on them, but at the same time, you've sort of trained them out of Singapore. Is that sort of the right way of describing it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to overly be beholden to the Singapore market itself, but our regional team are people that are well-versed in risks in Asia, well-traveled and well-experienced, whether it be Indonesian risk or Thai risks or Singaporean risks. So we do ensure that we have a group of solid underwriters in those respective countries, and they have the opportunity to grow regionally and then ultimately globally if they so choose to, ensuring that our people remains the focus of how we execute our strategies.
And obviously, as you already mentioned before, I suppose that part of the modus operandi of Sompo over the last decade has been inorganic growth. Obviously, in Asia, the great things, of course, just by being present in those economies that are all growing, the GDP is growing at a high rate, you get growth baked into what you're doing. But at the same time, Sompo has engaged in inorganic growth successfully over the last decade. And also, it's another part of your toolkit to grow. So how do you expect that inorganic growth to manifest itself in your region?
My focus and our focus has largely been organic growth.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of opportunity on the ground that we have not captured in each of the respective markets. And our focal point is exactly that, looking to strengthen the people on the ground, to educate and to give them training opportunities, to bring on new people on certain segments and certain growth opportunity areas. But we aren't shy to look at inorganic opportunities as well, things that can be accretive to our existing portfolio, that can be accretive to the Sompo Group. But our focus point on a day-to-day basis is organic growth across the organization.
That's great. Yeah, and the relationship with the international markets around the world, how is that managed? Is that often intergroup things? What's your relationship with different Sompo entities around the world?
APAC is, from a time zone perspective and a proximity perspective, it's a little bit further away compared to, say, a New York, London connectivity. But that said, we've really built our Singapore team with a lot of people from diverse backgrounds, right? People that grew up in the London market that are now trading in Asia, people that have come from Japan, people that have come from the US. So it's a very diverse team that we've created, which allows us to maintain the connectivity into all those markets that we currently operate in. And that's really a focal point for the Sompo organization to remain connected through communities, through various offsites that we have to ensure that we are sharing and leveraging the skill sets across the globe. So I have regular connectivity with colleagues in the US, with London, Tokyo, and that remains true across many of our product disciplines and functional disciplines that we have in APAC.
Yep. And again, operationally, it must be interesting, that you're trying to avoid being a group of siloed businesses in many, many territories. And operationally, again, if you're all on the same platform, I suppose that make it easier to see what everyone else is up to as well.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, another strength and benefit of being part of this Sompo organization. While we do have some legacy platforms, they are not to the point where it is extremely difficult to migrate off. So
Yeah.
relatively new company in many of the markets, which allows us to deploy and create a level of consistency that we are striving to get, especially in the commercial business where it's a little bit more interconnected globally, whether that be from a reinsurance perspective or rating perspective, et cetera. It allows us to analyze our data to make better informed decisions when we start integrating and driving the operational efficiency across similar platforms that we continue to deploy across the markets.
How are these markets evolving? For example, one of the big trends of the last decade in the US and certainly UK and now spreading into continental Europe has been the increase in the share of market, the commercial market, particularly taken by MGA distribution, MGA-led distribution. Do you think that trend will continue into Asia? It's quite an interesting thing because there are lots of big platforms, obviously the big hybrid carriers that have had explosive growth. They would say, well, it's going to come to everywhere at some point and eventually Asia Pacific. Of course, it's probably in Australia as well. And certainly in Australia would include that it certainly had a large growth in MGAs. What do you think about that from an Asian perspective?
Yeah, I don't think the MGA growth story is going to stop. It will continue in certain markets. And I think in APAC, you already see it significantly in the Australian market. You're starting to see more of it in Hong Kong and MGA-like opportunities in some of the other markets. And you're even seeing a few MGAs that have been able to set up shop in Japan as well. We don't shy away from MGAs, but we are very, very selective.
Great. But it's interesting that, yes, in terms of that macro trend, you think that that's certainly, it's not something that there's a Asian exceptionalism in that. There's no sort of exception to that. You think it's just as likely to increase its market share of Asia Pacific as it has done in North America, for example?
It really depends across the market, right? So I think Hong Kong's been a little bit more receptive to MGAs, whereas some other markets have not been very receptive to the MGA structure. So again, when we're operating across 11 countries, it does vary.
Given your experience, you've got a really unique career experience, having worked in pretty much all markets, all major markets in the insurance and reinsurance world. As we've often seen missteps of Western organizations setting up in Asia, often starting in Singapore, and then being there 3 or 4 years and it not working out and being subscale or not getting to where it needs to and pulling out. We've seen similar the other way around as well at different times. So what do you think the biggest misconceptions and missteps that people make when particularly North American, European carriers are going out to Asia Pacific, loving the GDP numbers and thinking, well, this insurance penetration's got to go up at some point. I need to be in this market for the future. This is a market of the future. What do they get wrong when they get out there?
I think what sets us apart is really our presence that we already have, right? So some of these markets, we've been there for 50 years. They know who Sompo is. The regulators have come to us for advice on many things, on the consistency and the commitment that Sompo has shown over the decades. So our starting point is very, very different first, but really following on what I mentioned earlier, being regionally aligned but locally empowered. Each of these markets that we operate in come in different forms and come in different sizes in regards to how we transact business. And it's about having the respect to understand and to appreciate and try to really work within some of the cultural nuances that we have in those countries and trying to bring global best practices that may improve the resiliency or improve the ability to serve our clients, that improves the customer experience of the client, and bringing that to the market to progress the market in a way that is meaningful for that specific market or country. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think that's where sometimes companies may stumble that have more experience working in Western markets where there may be similar regulatory regimes. There may be the EEA franchise across continental Europe, the United States, the sheer magnitude, size, and geographic diversity of the US market. It is different in the sense that we have different regulators at different levels of engagement and maturity curve protection gap differences. So we need to be agile. We need to be diverse in thought, as well as maintaining that discipline from a risk appetite framework perspective in order to make material progress in the APAC region.
So it says you've got to come prepared for every eventuality and treat every territory absolutely as a total individual, as almost a totally separate entity, rather than think of Asia Pacific as being a single entity.
Yeah, absolutely. But within a certain framework that drives where we can get the efficiencies and the commonality, but not try to drive it down top down, right? I think there are quite different nuance and differences of how you have to sensitively approach and respect each of the countries themselves.
Are there any lessons that Western markets could learn from Asia Pacific markets? Anything you've picked up in your time over there?
There's a lot of great things that come out of Asia Pacific, out of North Asia. The focal point on addressing protection gap issues, addressing some emerging trends that perhaps some other more mature markets have seen or have experienced in a bad way. There is no hesitation to learn from other markets to make sure that the local markets don't make the same mistakes. So I think there's a lot of openness to learn before you learn the hard way. So I think that's the strength of Asia Pacific and the markets that we operate in. Again, the market nuances changes in country to country, but when you are there as a consistent provider and when you have commitment to that country, there is a sense of loyalty and connectivity to the markets, perhaps a little bit more than some of the Western markets where it is very, very transactional. Again, that varies from country to country, but the loyalty of customers and the customer stickiness in certain segments is quite strong in the APAC region.
And is that partly due to because it's a two-way thing? Is it because you're sort of stickier to them? You know, you're more loyal to them. They're as loyal to you because you're loyal to them.
I think it depends on the distribution channel. If it's an agency, more of a general agency model versus a broker model or an aggregator model. Again, all those things take impact into that customer stickiness. But once they understand the commitment and understand the value that we provide, there isn't a tendency to jump ship every 12 months across certain segments.
Yeah. We couldn't be sitting in 2025 and not talk about tariffs. How's the imposition of tariff on exports, particularly obviously to the US market, affecting insurance business flows in APAC?
I think it's no different from any other risk that we continuously evaluate, whether it's climate-related risks or cyber-related risks. It's a risk that is now obviously on our radar that we continue to look at very, very closely. It can impact the cost of claims. It can impact replacement costs. It can impact various inflation type of numbers that we have anticipated for certain geographies and markets. It could create more supply chain disruption. It could create economic impact to some of the export-focused countries that we have in the APAC region. So all of these risks are focal points that we have already been looking at for many, many years and evaluating that. So yes, it's another risk that's added to the list of risks that we evaluate, but something that we will continue to weather through and adjust as necessary once we get leading indicators of certain changes, once we see or we can anticipate some changes coming down the road. But it's always about being very, very cognizant, being very analytical about some of the emerging new risks that come as a result of tariffs and changes.
So it sounds like we've had the shock, but we haven't really seen the effects yet. But that would say it's too early to say.
Yeah, I think especially in the marine cargo market where we are active, you mentioned the AUMI conference that was just held in Singapore last week. Our presence there was very strong, but that was one of the key topic points across that conference and amongst the underwriters, brokers, and industry. But I think it is still evolving and it is changing rapidly. But for us, it's really about keeping focused on what that means for our portfolio and ensuring that we're staying ahead of the curve.
Right. So you're just going to keep tabs on everything, watch everything like a hawk and be reactive, but be really on top of it.
Yeah, sure.
Ken, I've come to the end of my list of questions. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much. I think I better let you go. And it's later in the day for you.
Approaching 6 p.m. So yeah, certainly reaching towards the end of my day. But thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate the opportunity.
No, thanks so much for coming on the show. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this program. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. The Voice of Insurance podcast is produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling enterprise-scale underwriting through a single pane of glass. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.